Hello and welcome to Türkiye Talks. As usual, we are going to talk about recent international developments with Kadir Ustun from Washington. Kadir, hello.
Hi, Bora. How are you?
Yeah, thank you. We are going to talk about three issues today. First of all, we are going to talk about Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, which caused a great uproar in China. They started military exercises. Also, the U.S. allies in the region, they are also making exercises, military exercises. We are going to discuss why Nancy Pelosi has visited Taiwan under these circumstances. Also, maybe we should remind our viewers that this visit was not declared before, but everyone was expecting. We are going to talk about the recent developments in Iraq, which is a very important country in the region and which became the center of Middle East politics. As you know, Sadr supporters raided the parliament. Now there is a big chaos in the country. And also we are going to talk about Zawahiri's killing by probably U.S. Army in Afghanistan. So Kadir, let's start with Taiwan, if you like. We know that there is tension between China and the United States. Even during Trump's time, China was, let me say, targeted by the U.S. In national strategy documents. China was mentioned as a threat to U.S. National security. Also in NATO summits, in NATO final communiques, we have seen that China was mentioned again together with Russia as a challenger to U.S. World domination. We can say this was not the way in which, this is not the way the communique mentioned, but this was obviously the idea behind all these documents. What was the reason under these circumstances? Russia-Ukraine war is still going on. In the Far East, there is tension between U.S. allies and China. What was the reason of Nancy Pelosi visit to China, and does the U.S. government support this visit? Do you think this was a U.S. state policy or Nancy Pelosi? Let me put it this way.
Well, this particular visit was initiated by Speaker Pelosi. She's a Democrat, obviously. She's from the same party as the U.S. President Biden. But as you know, there's no hierarchy between them, so they can't really tell each other not to do something. And Taiwanese have really broad support in U.S. Congress, from Republicans as well as Democrats. And if you look at this latest visit, the reaction by Republicans was to applaud Pelosi's initiative. And of course, we should remind everyone that this was, this was a trip to Asia along with Pelosi's colleagues. And there was a question whether she would stop over at Taiwan. And if she didn't, if she skipped over Taiwan, it was probably going to look like China's pressure was going to sort of look powerful. So the White House, I don't think they closely coordinated with Pelosi. This was Pelosi's initiative, but White House privately, the media reported that the White House quietly asked her not to do this in terms of timing. They thought that, Xi Jinping would react strongly because in the fall there's a Communist Party Congress coming up, and he would need to show strength, and this would lead to further tensions. But at the same time, U.S. officials have been visiting Taiwan. White House cannot tell Pelosi not to go. So Biden didn't call Pelosi directly, and that would show sort of weakness on Biden's part. for domestic political purposes. You look weak to the Republicans, and Republicans can use this. So there's all these domestic aspects of this, but overall, the policy is kind of multi-layered. On the one hand, U.S. says they are still committed to one China policy, and at the same time, if China invades Taiwan, they will support Taiwan. They will give them all the arms they want. And if you remember, Biden made a kind of slip of the tongue. He made a mistake. They backtracked that comment later on. He was asked a couple months ago, I think, whether U.S. soldiers would be involved in case of an invasion. And he said yes. But of course, White House backtracked that comment, and they said that wasn't their policy. So at the very least, if something happened in Taiwan, if China tried to exert full control over the island, the U.S. would support the island to fight back. So that policy broadly hasn't really changed. But of course, Pelosi being such a high-level political figure, and she's a powerful figure, she's from the same party as the Democratic Party of the president, the U.S. president. So for China, I think they felt like they need to kind of put their foot down and limit U.S. action and U.S. involvement in the region. And as you know, in recent years, Xi Jinping has been trying to show some more muscle. China is no longer sticking to the economics only policy. They're not being shy about their national ambitions. So there are all these dynamics, of course, on the Chinese side. But your initial question, this visit does not really contradict U.S. policy. Does it help in terms of timing to the U.S. policy? That's something we can debate. That certainly made the White House uncomfortable. It certainly made Pentagon having to provide security and give China some sort of warnings, right? If they were to try to block this visit, they would respond. So tensions have been high because of this situation, but it's a bit both, basically. Your question about whether it's Pelosi or U.S. policy, it's both. And let me just say one more thing, and Turkey has experienced this a lot, right? U.S. presidents would think more strategically and tell the Turkish counterparts that, look, when it comes to F-35, F-16, Armenian resolution, other issues, they would always reassure Turkey, but then say that, well, Congress, is a separate branch of the government. And so sometimes White House and Congress work together, but sometimes they can divert in terms of both the policy and the tactics. I think both sides, U.S. and China, felt like they needed to show some muscle in many ways.
Yeah, I think also, after COVID pandemic, supply chain, the importance of the supply chain was understood by everyone. And also, many countries have been exposed for their weaknesses because of their dependence on this supply chain. I think also the United States, if we remember last year, they signed a new alliance agreement, the AUKUS. I think they want to keep pressure on China, because when you look at the map, China is surrounded or contained by Japan, South Korea, the Chain Islands, Taiwan, Philippines, and Indonesia. So these are all U.S. allies. Maybe by putting pressure with this visit on China and having their reaction, they are now making military drills, exercises. Maybe they are also looking for, uniting their camp against China and put pressure, because today I read the drills took place in Sumatra Island. It's the Malacca Strait, which is the lifeline of China. So I think, in a way, the U.S. also showing force and putting more pressure on China. I don't know if you would agree with that.
That's certainly true, Bora. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, was taken as a clear warning sign to China. If China decided to do similar things in Taiwan, it would basically have to face the Western alliance, and in this case, U.S. allies in the region, in the Asia Pacific, in a united voice led by Washington. So, and that's been sort of the U.S. policy of circling China and developing deeper relationships, economic and military relationships with countries around China, from India to Australia, the countries you mentioned. This has been the policy for a while now. So that policy is ongoing, and I don't think White House has given up on that. And when you mention supply chains, yes, the pandemic showed that U.S. was reliant on other countries, mainly China, even for masks. And the trade deficit is huge. 600 billion trade, 450 billion is imports from China, and President Trump really reacted to this strongly, and he tried to apply pressure on China every which way. So when you ask U.S. politicians, White House, Congress, and others, there is really broad agreement that you need to push back against China. China is going to try to dominate the region. They're becoming an economic power, and now under Xi Jinping, they're becoming much more of a military assertive power. So we need to contain this and push back and work with regional allies. So, but on the one hand, this White House repeated that they're still committed to one China policy. I feel like there's a bit of a contradiction here, right? You're for one China policy, but at the same time, you will defend Taiwan in case of invasion. So it's a bit like, at this point, it's a bit of a lip service to that policy that was defined back in the 70s, late 70s, to be able to open trade with China. They kind of threw Taiwan under the bus in many ways, but Taiwan, or they prioritized relations with China over Taiwan, but Taiwan is practically an autonomous, you could even call it independent, right? I mean, it's only recognized by a handful of countries, something like 15 countries recognize it as a separate nation, but it's not a stretch to say Taiwan is a different country, and a country that China hasn't been able to exert full control over. So this has been a problem, and the Ukraine example and U.S. warnings and U.S. Working with the regional allies, these all tell China not to take any action over Taiwan and keep the status quo, which actually majority of Taiwanese people also prefer holding on to the status quo. They don't want to join China, and they don't want to declare independence either. So it's a delicate balance, and this was Pelosi's visit at this time was presented by the Chinese as a provocation. I think they want to kind of show their limits. They want to prevent future high-level visits and deeper engagement with Taiwan, with the United States.
maybe because of the US policy in Taiwan and China, probably Chinese will also focus more on their road and belt policy, because this incident showed us that the United States and its allies are ready to, block the sea route to Chinese when there is an incident, when there is fighting, or if China invades to Taiwan. It will be a more regional issue, and if they block Malacca Strait as today, I mean, with the exercises as they show it to the world. So I think the Chinese road and belt policy becomes much more important, and it also has impact on Turkey, as Turkey sits in the middle corridor. So we have to be following what's going on in this part of the world. It seems far from Turkey, but definitely it may have impact on Turkish foreign policy. If you don't have anything to say on that, I'm going to move.
About the supply chain thing. Already, I think there's been some shift of the supply chain to Turkey. Turkey's exports have been breaking records. So, in today's globalized world, all these things impact each other, and we saw Turkey's role in the most recent grain exports from Ukraine as well. So all these issues become all intertwined.
From north to south, from east to west, Turkey sits in a very critical location. And also in terms of Turkey's infrastructure, with the new roads and railways, bridges and other stuff, Turkey is ready to, carry this load from its territory. Also digitally, we can say, I read in an article in Western media, it was saying that Turkey is important with its location, its infrastructure, and also its digital infrastructure, plus human resources. So Turkey can handle all these trade from east to west, north to south, and I hope and I think this will be an important asset for Turkey in the coming years. Let's move to Iraq. There has been protests going on in Baghdad, in the capital city. The pro-Sadrists, they raided the parliament. They sat in the parliament for days, and they challenged the political, let's say, because there is no government, the let's say the parliament and possible government. It's been about 20 years. 2003, March 20th, the American army invaded Iraq, and since then we have seen this chaos, civil wars, terrorism, political turmoil, and every kind of problem, plus human suffering, the failure of infrastructure, failure of democracy, and it's still going on. Let's look at what's happening in Iraq. Kadir, do you think this political turmoil can lead to another civil war? Because in 2006, if you remember, after Samara incident, there was a civil war between Shia and Sunni groups of Iraq. Also, the Kurdish regional government, it's another story. Right now, this time, we see not a problem between sectarian groups, but within Shia groups, we see a different kind of power struggle. How do you see this latest incident in Iraq, in Baghdad?
Bora, you're right. As you said, Iraq is a fractured country. It has gone through civil war. It has gone through, ISIS taking over parts of the country. It has not been a stable country, and there are these periods with spikes of violence, and whenever there is, political disagreements and pushes and pulls from different groups. It could be oil revenue issue. It could be Iran's influence versus America's influence, and other regional dynamics. When it's a weaker state structure, it's a fractured country like this, the regional developments impact them. And as you know, there's been quite a bit of disappointment, let's say, with the process of nuclear deal process. There hasn't been an agreement, and that's increasing tensions between Iran and the US, and there's no end in sight, it seems. So in the absence of a nuclear agreement, then you have more tension between Iran and Israel, and that gets reflected on Lebanon, on Syria, and Iraq as well. So Iraq has been sort of much more impacted by regional developments, and in the foreseeable future, in my opinion, it's going to remain the same, because this is a weak, fractured country with, different portions of the country being influenced by different powers, both regional powers and global powers. And the latest thing is I'm not an Iraq expert, obviously. I don't know the specific local political issues going on, but recent tensions, increased tensions in the region between Iran and Israel, Iran and US, I think that's playing a part. Sadr had done this before, and then things had quieted down. And since US still has influence there, I think they do get involved in terms of trying to find common ground, achieve some sort of stability. But unfortunately, I think the latest spike has something to do with that. But at the same time, I think Turkey's actions also. Remember the Tehran summit we discussed in detail in our previous shows. There, we saw how uncomfortable Iran was with Turkey's actions in the region. So I think, they put pressure on the Iraqi government with the, latest incident where in the, I couldn't remember the name of the town right now, but there was a attack, and that was blamed on Turkey, and the Iraqi government blamed Turkey as well, lodged a complaint.
You mean the Duhok incident? Yeah.
Yes, Duhok attack. And Turkey has strong relations with the Kurds in the north, but they're not happy with these tensions either. So I think this might have a role in it, but to be honest, I don't know the specific reasons for them, why Sadrists are now pushing back against other Shia groups. And I understand the broader picture, but it's hard for me to discuss the very specifics. But the broad structures, Baghdad government, everybody is trying to have influence over it. And there's a lot at stake, both regionally and oil revenue issues as well.
I think the main problem in Iraq, if you remember the first constitution when it was accepted, Sunnis boycotted and they were sidelined. Then we have seen the Iraqi politics was designed in a way that sectarian and ethnic differences were underlined, boldened by the Americans. Paul Bremer was the representative of the government. So I think because of this, the design of the Iraqi politics has problems. Maybe we should also remind our viewers that almost most of the political parties, they have military wings. It's like, as you mentioned, Lebanese politics. So if you look at the Kurdish region, KDP, they have their military force. If you look at Haçlı Şabi, you know, they are also a military wing of Shia groups. They have several groups. Sadr has his own movements. We can talk about Bedir brigades. So Sunnis, they have their military wings. The tribes also involved. So it's very complicated. And when it comes to
the fragmented structure,
yeah, when it comes to elections, the political, I mean, the government also structured by according to ethnic and sectarian lines. If you look at the past, the president is coming from Kurdish ethnic group. Now it was also from the Patriotic Union of Iraqi Kurdistan, the Talabani group. Now Barzani, KDP, they have more power and they want to have the presidential post. If you look at the prime ministry, it should be from Shia and the parliament spokesperson from Sunni group. So because of this, it is difficult to reflect a democratic will to the government. And I think Sadr, after he won the most seats in the parliament, now is trying to be the, I mean, the main political power, main political figure in the country. So probably he's pushing for that. Maybe because of this, we can see another civil war, as we have seen after Iraqi elections before. We have seen the Daesh raid to Sunni cities. Previously, we have seen other groups fighting against each other. So it seems it will be difficult. But from Turkish point of view, Turkey is more concerned about its own security. You know, defeating the PKK is a priority. And I think Turkey will continue to this policy. Whoever becomes the Iraqi prime minister or Iraqi president, I think Turkey's main focus will not change. Yeah.
That's right.
If you want, we can talk a little bit about the assassination of Ayman al-Zawahiri, who was the Al-Qaeda's second man during Osama bin Laden's time. After his killing, he became the most important figure who was involved in 9/11 attacks against U.S. targets, the World Trade Center and Pentagon. So why do you think this assassination took place now? Is it operational reasons, or we are coming to the first anniversary of U.S. leaving Afghanistan? Do you think this is related to that, or just operationally there was an opportunity and the Americans didn't want to miss it? It's very controversial these days.
That's right. I mean, according to media reports, CIA has been following him for about a year, I think, since since the beginning of this year. And, you know, it requires a lot of intelligence and surveillance, etc. And finally, they took this action. Of course, it's the U.S. policy to pursue Al-Qaeda members wherever they're in the world. And as you remember, Osama bin Laden raid created difficulties with Pakistan, and but the U.S. is just, you know, is not even going to discuss this. It will just take unilateral action on that front. But this latest, it was interesting. This latest assassination created kind of two different discussions. One was, you know, Republicans were saying, we have to be on the ground. You're pulling out of Afghanistan. You won't be able to fight Al-Qaeda from afar. What they call over-the-horizon operations. So this operation, on the one hand, shows that it can, right? It proves Biden right in saying that, look, we can still take them out. We have the capabilities and operational capabilities to do this. But on the other hand, why is he there? right? If the U.S. forces were there, he wasn't going to be there. So it's a bit of a two-sided argument. It's hard to win with one or the other, but Biden already, I think, kind of closed that chapter on pull out of Afghanistan, and any chance of Republicans trying to weaponize that against him is now slim, because he's going to say, look, we are still continuing operations, we are capable, we can still take them out. And then, Zawahiri was a very sort of symbolic figure by now. All the reports are indicating that he is not really involved. He was not involved in the very daily tactical matters around the world. Al-Qeada has transformed into a very different beast. But it is symbolically important, in terms of 9/11. This was probably the main planner, along with Osama bin Laden, and that's why it's not so much as a strategic victory, but more like a revenge killing, and for U.S. basically giving the signal or the message to terror groups once again that they'll pursue them wherever they are. So it makes Biden look strong, but will it convert to a lot of votes in November? Will it help him, his political platform, to get broadened? I don't really think so, because this discussion is a bit old by now. Yes, Osama being taken out was a big deal, but I don't think it's going to make a huge difference politically at home, because there's everything else from inflation to immigration to everything else. So but it is it tells you how the US going forward wants to deal with counterterrorism, international terrorism. Low cost, no US boots on the ground, work with allies where you can, and then take unilateral action when you have to. That's kind of what the US policy is.
Yeah, and we can say, with the death of Zawahiri, a chapter has been closed in history, because they dominated early 2000s with their terrorist actions all around the world. Remember the 9/11, also London bombings in underground. I remember Madrid bombings again. So they were the first, the pioneers of these kind of terrorist actions all around the world. Then, as you said, with the killing of Osama bin Laden, now we have a new generation of that type of organizations. We see much different. We see people, terrorists who act on their own, or with smaller groups. But these guys were the theoreticians of this ideology, which actually cost a lot, not only to Western world, but also, I believe, to Muslim world, because their portrayal of Muslims and Islam became a big problem for ordinary Muslims who has nothing to do with this ideology. But probably it will take longer time to defeat that kind of organizations. But I also think that this is very interesting, because it took place in Kabul under Taliban rule. So that's just a question whether Taliban also wanted to get rid of him or not. We don't know what kind of we don't know if there is a negotiation with Americans, or it's just, as you said, a unilateral action. It is difficult for us to say what happened exactly, but CIA said he was killed in his balcony, so without harming any other people. So I think they also learned from, if this is true, their raid from Osama bin Laden's killing, because his family members also were killed. Also, there was another action in Idlib when, remember, I think it was last year, a leader of a terrorist group was killed. Along with him, some other people also died. So this is the way how US deals with it. So with this,
Bora, let me just say, I think it's very difficult for, yes, you know, you can always speculate, but I think coordination with Taliban is something that, you know, that would have been way too risky, that information, you know, but it tells me, what it tells me is that Taliban did not quite, you know, get the lesson so far. Like, unless, like you said, if they actually cooperated somehow, they knew about it. I highly doubt that, because they could have tipped them off, so Americans would not really share that information with Taliban, I would think. But you never know these things. It's the dark, secret world of intelligence, I guess. But him being in Kabul, right? That really doesn't look good on Taliban, because it tells me that they haven't gotten the lesson, you know, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, Kadir, thank you very much. I think we discussed all three matters in detail. Thank you very much for watching us, and hope to see you next week.